Hello and welcome. Here we are once more. It is, of course, Miscellaneous Friday. We will, however, be doing Worldbuilding Wednesday today, of course, as it's a bit of a mix-up. We'll get into that in just a moment. So, here we go. As usual, I am your host, Casimira Basilius, Lord in the Empire, here to bring you Imperial State-approved. Well, whatever it is we do. And it's state-approved because I'm the state, yes. Well, not entirely. Of course, as an Imperial Lord, I answer to a higher-up Imperial Lord. I am a vassal, of course. So, but it's not like they care what we're doing here. The Empire is, of course, one of the largest factions around here. So it's not like they're watching every single lord or, as long as we don't break any major Imperial rules, everything should be fine. So, where were we? Well, let us make sure that everything is, in fact, working. And it is very good. So, last time was, of course, Solo Sunday. However, that seems to have been, I say seems to have been, it was cut short. It's not like I wanted to simply disappear mid-sentence, I believe. I think it was even at the end of a sentence, but it wasn't of choice. What occurred was, as I recall, it is a bit hazy as things happen, but what occurred was we were in transit, as I recall, on board my ship, of course, my battleship. Our crew was going about their business. We were in FTL. And, well, we hit a bit of an FTL disturbance. And, due to the fact that we broadcast with a quantum relay and so forth, and we use a multidimensional thing and all the like. Turns out FTL interference, well, not only did it end our little broadcast, it threw our ship heavily off course and damaged it and so forth. But in simple terms, the broadcasting device got damaged and the ship got thrown off course and damaged, and I've basically been having it fixed. And so here we are. Hopefully, we are still, of course, in my ship in FTL. That's not the hopefully bit, but the hopefully bit is, ideally, things won't, FTL disturbances won't cause another flaw. And if they do, we have a backup plan this time. Ideally, hopefully. Anyway, it was a 1 in a million chance, by the way. By the way, here we are, broadcasting from the bridge of my starship. Of course. And the starship, here we are, in case you wanted to know the starship. I have to remember to keep things to the left of the screen because, So, yes. Broadcasting from on board the bridge of our starship, technically currently traveling through FTL, so, hopefully things don't go south again. Now, where were we? Underground, here we are. Of course, we're not running today, we are world building. So, let us do so. Where to begin? Well, all I was saying, it was like 1 in a million. We had, in an unrelated incident, we had a slightly damaged engine. I say engine, technically FTL core. Our FTL core was slightly damaged. Well, I say damaged. It was damaged, sort of. It was kind of, so not like it got damaged, sort of. How do I put this? Standard wear and tear. Maintenance operations, it wasn't operating at 100%. Replacing parts, making sure it was working perfectly. Standard maintenance. So it wasn't, it was, parts of it were slightly degraded. We were repairing it mid-transit. Normally, that's not a problem. We are the Empire, of course. There's redundancies and the like. However, we weren't in a standard FTL lane. Being not in a standard FTL lane increases the chances of failure. If you didn't know, we'll cover all that. We are still working on our FTL lore episode, in which I explain the FTL lore of Galactic Requiem and the galaxy we live in to you. We are still working on the series. We have had to put it on slight delay. I mean, we haven't been working on it over the short amount of time that we've been gone because, well, we've been working on getting the ship back up and running. But basically, we'll cover all of it then with explanations of how it all works. But in simple terms, non-standard FTL jump. Not really jump, we were going through standard FTL, but non-standard FTL transit increases the risk of failure. FTL weather and or effects occurred, increasing the risk of failure further. Non-standard route, weather effect, damaged FTL core, all at the same time, 1 in a million. I say that because, well, I mean, normally it's not like it's that unlikely, but given that we're on board an Imperial battleship, we are, like I keep saying, one of the most advanced and largest nations in the galaxy. Normally, FTL is not risky at all for us at all, whatsoever. But these three things in combination, while broadcasting with a multi-dimensional device, of course, which is how we all broadcast to you, all these things together, 1 in a million chance, all at once. Even our Imperial redundancies could not save us from an unfortunate effect. And hence our broadcast was cut short, our ship was thrown off course, damaged, and, well, we spent all the time getting things back up and running. And here we are. We're still off course, things are still damaged, and there are still FTL effects going on. However, we have our best engineers working on things, and they've got us here once more, technically moving through FTL and broadcasting once more. And so here we are, bringing that to you. They can't do anything about the FTL weather, but, now I know it's not weather, but unfortunately, as we don't speak the same language as you, more than likely, unless you're speaking Galactic Standard, which I would be shocked at, unless you're, well, for those of you, I assume it's you Elysians out there, for you Galactic citizens out there, you are hearing the right word for it. For you Elysians out there, you are hearing the word weather, but I don't think there's another translation for you Elysians. There's probably a better word in your Elysian languages for for this. There's probably a better word, but our translators are saying that the best word is weather. Of course, it's not like rain or, but there are effects in FTL that are sort of like weather's the best word that we have to translate to you. Unfortunately, we're not entirely versed with Elysian, as Elysia is a minor nation with a few worlds. And we do broadcast multidimensionally too, so I suppose we broadcast to a bunch of Elysians, but that's not really relevant, I don't think. But in short terms, it's the best word we got right now. I mean, surely it's not the word in Galactic Standard, but it's the word that we use here because, I mean, it's what it's translated to you as. So, of course, this is World Building Friday. Different than usual, but, So it is our job to ramble about the lore and talk about how games work and, of course, just have a good time. So yes, we have a backup in case anything goes wrong, ideally, hopefully. A plan, at least. So, where were we? Oh yes, genuinely, right before this, right before we started our broadcast, I was working on something I say not really unrelated, but half unrelated. So, of course, as it says right there, if you look right there, Galactic Requiem. That is what we do. However, like I said, we do talk about Elysian media and so forth. But here at, well, sort of here, how do I put it? We have other things that we do, technically. So, of course, I run a lot of games for a lot of people. Tabletop games, of course. And there is, of course, Galactic Requiem, which is our primary thing. It's our primary thing. Hence, I'm Lord Basil of Galactic Requiem, and of the Empire and the setting of as Galactic Requiem. However, there are other settings. Crazy that. There's actually one other primary setting. So the majority of as we've been over, Galactic Requiem is a living universe with a lot of things in it. When I say a lot of things in it, I mean there are entire sectors and worlds dedicated to certain, well, not really dedicated, with certain things. The way we say is they have certain things in them, and these things can pertain to different campaigns that we run. For instance, there are worlds that are cut off from the wider space society, and there are worlds that are cut off from the complete wider space society with no FTL and are literally cyberpunk style, no high-tech FTL space opera, just low tier. I say low tier, not low tier, but slightly lower tech than the galactic standard of tech level 16. Just lower tech, no FTL, cyberpunk style, you know, worlds. And then there are, of course, worlds that are completely cut off after disasters that are apocalyptic. And of course, we run apocalyptic campaigns there. There are worlds that are just, as your Elysians would consider, tech level 10 modern. And there are campaigns there. There is a world, this is one of my favorites, that it's actually a star system that is, well, I say worlds, they're usually entire star systems. If not usually sometimes subsectors or more, it's usually star systems. That there's a star system that is a sort of low tech 19 18. 1850s tech level. It's sort of like the Wild West up into World War II. It's the Wild West up until World War II, a little bit before the Wild West. Sort of like, it's sort of a steampunk, sort of a old-timey world in which a lot of eldritch things are run, sort of the good old classic, this good old classic Lovecraftian stories era, all the way up to World War II. Because I mean, some of the Lovecraftian era stories go up to there. I mean, they usually go before there because that's the end of Lovecraft's writings before World War II. But some of the writers who worked with Lovecraft kept going, so it goes a bit beyond that era. But that's basically where we call it for that era. So it's sort of like old-timey Victorian era up to World War II, sort of tech level Lovecraftian adventures, but also not always Lovecraftian adventures, because the entire point of Lovecraftian adventures is it's not always, there. The Lovecraftian aspects are there in the background. I mean, all in the Lovecraftian stories, of course, the characters are seeing these things, but the entire point of the Lovecraftian series are mostly all this stuff is in, I mean, as the old game says, the dark corners of the earth. So, they're not there in the wider world. The people see these horrors and they occur, but it's not wide known in the society and so forth. It's in the background, in the corners, these things are going on. And so, it's a lot of campaigns there are standard, Wild West campaigns or with nothing strange per se. But there are campaigns in which there are the more eldritch things going on. And, there's basically everything in Galactic Requiem. There's worlds of every variety. Medieval worlds, there are pure medieval worlds. There are like actual medieval no fantasy stuff. There are, of course, medieval fantasy worlds with magic and wizards and all that. There are, there are worlds of every variety in the galaxy. Worlds of every variety. The galaxy is wide, vast, and heavily colonized. Not necessarily heavily colonized, but there's lots of civilizations in the galaxy. There's lots of unexplored worlds. Don't get me wrong. There's entire swaths of space that are unexplored. But that's the entire thing about a galaxy. Many sci-fi writers get it wrong. A galaxy is vast. Absolutely vast. And so it's not infinite, but for the sake of the scale of a galaxy, it's practically infinite. If we were to open up that game we played the other day, Space Engine, and as I showed you, every dot being a galaxy, the universe is vast, but even just a galaxy, the amount of stars and planets in a galaxy are unimaginably large. Anyway, all that's to say, there's lots of settings here in Galactic Requiem, but there is one that we have that we primarily work, we primarily work on Galactic Requiem. There is one secondary setting that we have, of course, that is not Galactic Requiem at all, which is, of course, we run other games that are completely based on, other stuff. We have a Starship Troopers campaign, of course, based on the old Starship Troopers tabletop RPG, not the war game. Of course, I know of the Starship Troopers war game, which is real good fun. The old tabletop war game with the little miniatures. I suppose it's a miniatures game. Good fun. Anyway, it's based on the old tabletop RPG, which is based on the. I'm gonna. No, we're not going there. I will ramble for hours about Starship Troopers. We're not going to do that today. But I could ramble for hours, of course, about Starship Troopers. I'm fighting not to. I assure you, I am currently battling myself, going, no, don't do it. Don't go into detail about Starship Troopers. But I could. I really. We're going off topic if we do. Okay, fine. No, I can't not. I can't not. So, so of course, those of you out there might know Starship Troopers from the book. Not all, no, most of you probably know Starship Troopers from the movie, not the book. Let's be fair. Most of you know Starship Troopers from the movie, not the book. Probably. I could be wrong. I would be shocked if I'm wrong. But there's, of course, the movie, there's the book, there's the comics, there's a few other bits of media. There's the old anime. Yes, there was an old animation of Starship Troopers. There's the movies, of course, we've covered that. There's the animated Roughnecks series. There's the war game, which is based more on the same thing as the Roughnecks series. Then there's the there's of course the games. There's many. There's the old Starship Troopers game, the old one. It was a first-person shooter. It was a single-player first-person shooter. There was the Starship Troopers new squad team game where you multiplayer. There's the slightly older Starship Troopers strategy video game. I say slightly older. It's slightly older than the newer team-based one. There is there might have been another one. There's also the tabletop, like I said, which is based on the Roughnecks one. The tabletop RPG, which is based off the Roughnecks, and the war game. Well, the miniatures war game and the miniatures war game, and okay, we're calling it that. Nope, because like I said, I could go on for hours, and I'll go on about how each of them are loosely related to each other. Oh, there's also the newer animated, because there's the Roughneck series was 3D. Then there's the newer 3D ones. That yeah, then there's the newer 3D ones that are half a continuation of the original, but they ignore some of the things from the original, because there's Starship Troopers 1, 2, and 3, and then then the I believe the newer 3D one breaks from the 1, 2, and 3 lore around after 1 or 2, I believe. Maybe they break after 3, but I'm pretty sure they don't break after 3. I'm pretty sure they ignore the third one. I'm pretty sure. No, we're done. No, I've already said we're done. No. Because I could explain all the intricacies of how they actually tie together and which ones are connected and which ones aren't, and we're not doing that. Okay, so as I was trying to say, we run a variety of other things, a variety of other games. The other one that is a custom setting is Sputniks and Space Marines. It is, of course, Sputniks and Space Marines is a game we run that is technically not Galactic Requiem, but is run by our little industries here. Sputnik's Space Marines being a spoof, of course, on, you know, all those games that have Thing and Thing. It runs on the same system as Galactic Requiem with one slight modification. And it is sort of a, 1970s Cold War, but sort of 70s and 80s action hero, but also 1920s to 50s pulp novel. It's pulp novel meets action meets 80s, 70s, the 70s, 80s, 90s action heroes, sort of, wacky adventure, run around, being an action hero, kind of, adventures through space, good stuff, good stuff. Sort of an action hero sort of thing. With, when I say pulp things, I mean sort of, wacky villains, over the top wacky villains, crazy things that you wouldn't think would work. So sort of the players are sort of action heroes, the good old 80s action, 80s and 90s action movie action heroes, while but what works is sort of pulp adventure-y, slap together some devices and it'll shoot electricity, like sort of wacky science. It just, you slap it together and crazy things happen. Wacky science sort of, oh no, this has made a wormhole, but sort of a sort of like that, Anyway. But we're talking about Galactic Requiem, of course. My entire point is, before we started here, I was working on some Sputniks and Space Marines things, which has this one special system that Galactic Requiem doesn't have. See, the problem was Sputniks and Space Marines is supposed to be that. But Galactic Requiem, unless you're doing higher powered stuff, is a gritty, down to earth. I say down to earth, of course there's wacky stuff in Galactic Requiem, but it's more down to earth. If you get shot, bad things are going to happen. I mean, I was going to say, as you've seen, unfortunately, they aren't archived. But with our previous adventures, for instance, Eshadon, I believe his name was, the previous character we followed around before we followed Juliana Aldous, several times would immediately get shot and drop to the floor, having been injured. Hell, that happened to you. I mean, was that here? No, it wasn't. Unfortunate. It's not been uploaded yet. Juliana Aldous, on one of her adventures, also got shot and severely injured in a mission and decided to take the money and run. So, basically, Galactic Requiem is rather deadly. It's not like you necessarily will die. There are ways to mitigate it, but it is relatively a deadly setting. Sputniks and Space Marines, not so much. I mean, it is, but that's the problem. It runs on the Galactic Requiem engine, basically. So we've had to, what I was working on is I worked on a system to make it more reflect the action hero things, and I was just working on that before we got here today. Like, literally right before we started, I was working on the little system that makes it different. The one custom little system that makes Sputniks and Space Marines different. Because I want it to be, different. And so it has its own little nifty system that changes the way things work. I suppose I'll explain it. Why not? So, in Sputniks and Space Marines, there's these sets of modifiers, basically. And basically, in simple terms, I'll just go over it quickly because we don't do Sputniks and Space Marines here. So I'll go over it real quickly. There are basically a bunch of things that are, we'll just say cards. But the cards are drawn and given to the players. Each player starts with basically a minimum of one card. Everything else runs like normal, but you're basically given a card or a shard or however you want to call it. And it has an effect on it. For instance, one of a few effects. And if you do something risky and action hero-y, even if it fails or succeeds, you gain a power if it's related to your effect. For instance, let's say you draw a shard that is combat related. If you do a risky or dramatic thing that is combat related, if it fails or succeeds, your little card goes up a tier. So it goes from 1 to 10. And at any time, you can spend one of the 3 shards you can hold it at any given time. You can hold 3 shards at any given time. You can spend it to increase it by whatever the tier of your shard is. So if you're doing a combat action and even if you fail, that combat shard goes up by 1. You can then spend it on a combat action. So even if you failed a lot at combat, eventually this thing, or even if you succeed, it goes up a tier whenever you do something combat related. Or dramatic and combat related. As long as you're being a risky action hero, it goes up a tier. So even if you're failing a lot, eventually you'll have a card that's like tier 10. And then you can make a roll, slap that down, and it's a plus 10 on whatever you've done. Basically encouraging the players to take risky actions. So even if they're failing or succeeding, if they're being risky, this thing's going up tiers, getting them all the way up. They can spend it at any tier, but basically they can throw it down and be like, plus 10 on this roll, which is a big bonus, basically, you know? Like, if you know stats and so forth in the way this game, Galactic Requiem works, a plus 10 is big. So basically, you can get up to a plus 10 on something to encourage you to take risks and be action hero-y. However, obviously, it's not only combat. There's a bunch of different things, a bunch of different effects that basically apply to it. And whenever you do something related to an effect, your cards go up in tiers, and they are slightly random, but this entire system behind it, basically. But it's there to encourage the players to be risky. And of course, we use modified rules. I say modified rules. There's technically world modifiers in Galactic Requiem that we can apply. And one of them is basically players can always regain an action die by spending a full round action. So basically, they have action die that they can draw from, and then they can throw down these cards in addition, and basically encourages them to take risks and mitigate damage with their cards and action die, and, you know, be an action hero. Anyway, let's get down to business. So, we are, of course, talking about world building. I suppose that is a bit of world building, but usually we talk about Galactic Requiem. But, I mean, this is Miscellaneous Friday, so we can ramble. Let's see. But basically, that's the system in Sputniks and Space Marines that I'm working on clarifying a little bit to make it a bit more understandable for the players. Specifically, I was working on writing down each of the effects and what they do, so they're listed, because they are a little bit vague. I mean, there's more to it than that, than I explained, of course, because every shard, there are shards and then there are sets, and sets are a bit more powerful, they're passive, and you can gain cards by just doing a dramatic action, they're randomly generated, and there's this entire thing. Anyway, here we are. So, last time, we're of course not continuing. We're saving that for miscellaneous, not miscellaneous, for Solo Sunday. But we have our gangsters, our little map here. What was our thing? Let us bring up our sheet. The large sheet. Nope, I have to make it visible. There. There we go. What was our last event? It has been a while, of course. Someone is watching. The target is taken by a gang of criminals. They offer the target for money. And there is a standoff. I will have to double check everything after this to make sure exactly where we left off. Of course, like I said, I've been trying to get everything working given the whole FTL matter. But of course, given that we literally got cut off mid-session, I forgot to award experience. Let's do that now. So that goes up to 50. Two. There we are. Eventually we'll get another level. Let's see here. So, yes, I don't entirely recall where we left off because it's been a while, so of course I'm gonna have to go over my notes and check the stuff and see where we left off last time. Before, before Sunday, because we're going to continue on Sunday, of course. But we also have our gang. Yes. Let me check my sheet here. There's one thing I want to double check, which is how we've statted them. I'm pretty sure we need to edit their stats. Could be wrong, though. Okay, I don't have the book open. That was another thing I wanted to check. Here we are. We'll just open it. We already have it open here, so we'll just scroll down. It says here, we may have given them a bit high of stats, but it's... Yeah, we'll edit those stats. We haven't, like, fully statted them yet. It's just, I copied the base sheet over, and I know that the base sheet is a bit high. I also want to check one thing here, And then we'll edit that file. So to get to the file, I have it saved like... Nope. It's on this file. Here we are. Nope. Here we are. Yes, here we are. Let's zoom out. I'm used to having everything in 0.6 font. Okay. The occult skull stays the same. Let's make this a bit more reasonable here. I think that's better. Oh yes, and I was checking something over here. If it ever loads. Okay, very good. Back to work. So, we have a gang in a large, basically, mega city that everybody is, I say everybody, but basically the local forces are, I mean, there's multiple gangs, of course, but basically the local forces, the local police forces, don't like dealing with this area. Like, they basically avoid this area because it's such a problem. We know that they are armed with heavy weapons. So, let us try and stat them, and we'll talk about nations while we go about that. I always keep wanting to go on about nations and organizations, and this gives us an opportunity to do that. So, nations and organizations in Galactic Requiem have stats. There's not much here that doesn't have stats, which allows us to... I've been over this many a time, I'm pretty sure. Everything in Galactic Requiem can interact with it, can interact with everything else around with it. Characters can interact with vehicles and starships. Nations can interact with everything can interact with everything. Where did I put it? I was just on the section and then I started scrolling and lost it. That is annoying. How? I'm sorry, I was shocked there for a second, not about that, but about the fact that I looked over and it turns out, so this document, the document I'm looking at for my nations and so forth, is at 0.6 font. As I said, I like working at 0.6 font. Why? Who knows? I like, because as you see here, with the thing that you can see, this is a sort of block of organizedness. A lot of my notes and rules and so forth are organized in lists and charts. And I like being able to have full rows of information in lists and charts and so forth, and paragraphs in certain sections and single lines. I like having things separated by lines and so forth when I'm working on Galactic Requiem. So I'll use 0.6 font so things will fit on single lines, and charts like this will fit if I have extra data. Like, see, this goes over resource mod, and then it goes over there, and in 0.6 font it doesn't. We'll actually show that off. Why not? Because like I said, I like working with 0.6 font. Unfortunately, I don't think we can do that. No, we'd have to go over to our other editor. But in simple terms, I assure you, this line does not fall over and scroll over in 0.6 font. As you can see, that's my entire point. Anyway, so the entire file is 0.6 font for nations and organizations, and I was scrolling trying to find the section, and I look over, and the nations and organizations file, which is literally just for mass combat, empire, and nation rules. I look over, and it's 117 pages at 0.6 font. And I'm like, oh gosh, oh no. Yes. Which is, you know, when you're searching for one section because you haven't organized it well, makes things difficult. Here we are. So we know that the city police forces don't like messing with these people because this entire section's a write-off for them. And a city police force has the average stats of 10 scattered around. We know there are multiple gangs. We know that the gangs are probably more equipped than the local police forces, if not as well equipped. Because there are multiple gangs. And we know that this is sort of a, you know, as we've been over, this is a very, like, this is a undercity sort of gang-controlled territory. Think, you know, cyberpunk settings. So, they probably have heavily armed, heavily equipped, and so forth. And as I say, the police force's stats are 10, meaning the gang's stats are probably ranging from 8 to 12. And that's how we've arisen at that number. But let's see what's what. Their influence is probably at the lower end. So that'll be 8 minus 1. They don't have a lot of influence. They have no occult. Information. That will actually be 6. Minus 2. Because there's not like they have a lot of information. I suppose I'll tell you what that all means while we're going about it. I just have to bring this up. So, in simple terms, influence is the equivalent of charisma. It measures how much pull the organization has. So it's not like they have a lot of pull in any major way. Of course, they have influence over the local area and the local shops and so forth, but less so than 10, of course. They have no occult. Information is sort of the equivalent to intelligence. It measures how much scientific knowledge and research ability an organization has, how much information they can bring to bear. And we're giving them a what? A 6 in information? Yeah. It's not like they have a lot of dedicated researchers. It's not that they're necessarily dumb or anything. But it's not like they have a lot of dedicated researchers. See, I'm torn on this one. Because information does, I believe, let me check the rules. So nations have skills. I'm trying to see what information modifies. It does modify mechanics. See, that's why I'm not concerned, but considering whether it should be 6 or 8. Because they do have the ability to work on things, I'll give them a 6 in it. And they would just put the majority of the points, the skill points that would earn from it, in that. And they would basically, what they would do is they'd have their specific workers be workers with the mechanic effect, thus offsetting the -2 modifier they would receive. I mean, it's not like they receive a -2 on the... I'd have to explain how that works. And since this is related, we will. Basically, an organization's modifiers and skills are not a direct penalty to the people inside the organization. The modifiers affect an organization assist check. They also affect what you can do with the organization, to be fair. I don't think we've been over this before. Or if we have, we've been over it in... I don't think we've been over it here in the archived section, so... And it's fine if we explain it again. So, an organization can make a skill check like a player. However, an organization, 90% of the time when making a skill check, is making an assist check. Because an organization making a check makes a check with its worker. If it doesn't have a special unit, let's assume it has a standard worker unit. It makes a check at +6. 1d20 plus 6. And that's it. However, the organization, so that completely ignores the organization. It's 1d20 plus the member's check of 6. Now, where does the organization's stats come in? The organization makes an assist check. What that means is the organization rolls its thing. An organization assist check, here we are. 1d20 plus the assigned person. In this case, we'll say the average NPC unit, so 6. 1d20 plus 6 plus the organization's used skill that it's using to assist. So organizations have skill points, as you can see by our skills section. So let's say we're making a mechanics with the game. The organization will assist the individual with a 1d20 plus 6 plus, let's say they have 3 points in mechanics. 1d20 plus 6 plus 3 minus 2. So 1d20 plus 6 plus 1. Let's say we roll. We're not going to roll on the thing. This is an example. It's not like it's important. 10. 10 flat. So that is 17. The organization has rolled a 17 on an assist. What that means is, after that, we check here. Anything above a 10 is a +2. For every 5 above 10 is an additional +1. Since we got a 17, that is going to be 3. That is a total of 3. What then occurs is that check I mentioned before. So where we'd roll, we got a 6 plus 6 from our base NPC for a total of 12 plus 3 for a total of 15 on their mechanics check. basically, if you see, in simple terms, the organization stats in a check like this basically apply an assist modifier to the person doing the action. Now, that seems like it may take a while. It doesn't actually. It really doesn't actually take that long to do. Of course, explaining it and doing it while explaining it takes a minute. But when actually doing it, it's as simple as going, make one skill check, and then make another skill check. And then you get your total. And that's no more difficult than if one player is assisting another player, because you'd be doing literally the exact same. Except with a player, you don't get an additional bonus for every tier above. An assist is usually just a flat +2. Well, an organization can assist at greater than that. So it's really not that much more complex than you choosing to assist another person. It's literally easy. Explaining it obviously takes a minute, but it's rather streamlined. So basically, in simple terms, that's what these mean. So it's not like having a -2's that big a deal in regards to it, because as I mentioned, workers are flat 6. You can have elite units, important individuals, and influential leaders that specialize in certain skills. So they would likely have a mechanic unit that specializes in a certain thing. So there's a chance they get an additional organizational bonus in the check, but it's not like it matters that it's a negative. It just basically, the negative here in an assist check basically just means that it's less likely for them to apply an assist on the person. That's all it means. It's not bad. You know, unless. And what I mean by that is organizations basically entirely act with assists. Almost entirely, unless they're fighting each other. But then they're still using assists with their individual units, but so it's not really. But anyway. Where it does matter is actions and requests. Actions and request checks are flat checks on the skill, basically. You can make a request of an organization to take an action, and their check is worth the value of whatever that score is, and some of them are those, but it's basically the value, maximum value that the check can achieve. So it's not like it's bad. Like literally the entire organization thing is basically a flat bonus. There's almost no downside to it for the most part. I mean, there are downsides, but we'd have to cover the entire thing. Here we are. Resources? We'll say 12. They do have a lot of resources, and response will say 12. Let's switch that around. Resources 10, response 12, force 12. The reason being, they have more force than they have resources. I was conflating force and resources. They have reasonable resources, same resources as sort of as the city police. But they have more force. I mean, I say the average is 10 for city police, so they can rise and go below that, but it's like the average. And I'd say they are on par, numbers-wise. Except police force would have higher information than them and probably higher influence than them. And depending on the police force, they might actually have a cult, which allows them to have casters and so forth. But what they don't... yeah, no, that's about right. We'll go with that as our spread of numbers for them. And they have 1 unit of gangsters, which is 100. Which is going to be 1 health from Pop. No elite units, no influential individuals, no important leaders. Important individuals and influential leaders, yeah. Do we classify this place as a stronghold? Maybe. And lastly, stats. For this, we go 12 plus 12 plus 10 plus 6 plus 1 plus 8. 49. Equals 50. With 0 resources, that's a 0 mod. So the current max HP is 50 unless we count this place as a stronghold, in which case I'll just edit it. HP is used when attacking an organization. Kind of. Organizations can be attacked by basically destroying their things and killing their units or getting them to disband and so forth, and it can force an organization to disband by getting this to 0. There's one thing I need to check. Here we are. I'm trying to find if an organization, I'm not if, specifically, organizations, as you see, have skills. I'm trying to figure out whether it's times 4 or times 5. Skills, where are the skills? Four times its int. And its information, and its information is 6. So we have a total of 24. So they'll have 24 skill points to spend on their skills. What skills will this gang have? Pop 4 in mechanics. Pop 2 in medicine. Four in intimidate and manipulate. Let us make sure we're keeping track of these numbers, otherwise that would be annoying. There we go. Let's see. Tactics, 4. None of those. Two in search. Not really security. Streetwise, definitely. All four in there. And they're out of points. There we are. Oh, if you didn't know, I mean, not really unlike, character stats can go all the way up, but organization stats go all the way up to 100. So character stats aren't capped. They just can keep theoretically going. It's not likely they'll get higher than like 30 for a character. Just the math on that. Yeah, 29, 30. Modifications, basically either cybernetic or biological modifications for strength, plus if you put all five, I'm using strength as an example because it's easier, all five ranks from leveling up to level 20 into it. And if you have a base 18, gets you to 29. And you can probably get one more from one of the feats or something, so gets you to like 30. Of course, they can go higher. It's just unlikely that some standard individual will have a base unmodified score higher than 30 for a Terran, of course. Of course, there are aliens, and they're, you know, I mean, if we're talking about aliens, the Sciortan, I believe they are literally giant. I say giant, but like they're literally large or huge size category silicate rock beings. So, you know, obviously they have a bit higher base strength score than people. And, you know, so that modifies that. But I'm talking about standard Terrans, of course. I mean, it is, like I said, even for a standard Terran, it is possible to get above that. Of course, there are artifacts and blessings from deities and all sorts of, there's all sorts of ways. Obviously, just putting on power armor will boost your strength score, but, you know, it's sort of not a innate thing. Anyway, there's no limit to character scores, but there are limit to organization scores. Organization scores cannot go above 100. And nation scores cannot go above 100. However, nation scores are counted as times 10 on an organization scale. So, if a nation had a 6 in information, that would be a 60 on the organization scale. Now, if you're wondering, what about megacorps? Well, Omnicorp is a nation. It actually uses nation rules. But organizations, so nations have one block. A nation, theoretically, I suppose, can have organizations under it. But a nation can't have multiple nation blocks. A nation, I mean, that's not entirely true. A nation can have vassals. But these sub-nations, it's a bit complex. In simple terms, what I'm trying to say is organizations in our system can have subsidiaries. And those subsidiaries can have subsidiaries. And it goes all the way down until I believe you can have, let me check, I want to get this right. And the document does not want to load. That's always fun. Here we are. Subsidiaries somewhat act like vassal nations in how they work. They pay 1/10 of their earnings to the primary organization. Subsidiary organizations pay 1/10 of their income to the primary organization. An organization basically cannot have any more than 10 subsidiaries, but they can have, let's see. Yeah, an organization can have no more than 10 subsidiaries. However, a subsidiary organization can have no more than 5 of its own. Second tier subsidiaries. A second tier subsidiary can have no more than 2 third tier subsidiaries of its own, and a third tier subsidiary can have no more, and just can't have subsidiaries. I mean, it's a third tier subsidiary. That's getting ridiculous. If you want a fourth tier subsidiary, why would you? Look, you're only complicating the way the game works. There's no reason to do that at that point. But basically, they can have a lot of subsidiaries. Well, vassal nations are far more difficult. So it's entire sort of thing. Technically, I mean, it's complicated. But a nation can have organizations under it, and they almost always do, and those can have subsidiaries and so forth. Any basically corporation that's large enough simply acts like a nation with organizations under it. That's how that works, basically. And nations have tiers. So, of course, there are, I say nations have tiers, there are different statuses of nations, basically. They have different scales, all the way from, continental to galactic. And this adds different modifiers to their stats, basically. Like I said, it's times 10 for a nation to organization, but that's not entirely always true. That's for like a standard spacefaring nation, and there's entire rules for all this. I assure you, it's hard to explain, but at least as far as I've seen, it works, and my players quite enjoy running organizations and nations. Anyway, here we are. So we have that. We have our skills down. Yep, that is maximized skills. The organization gets feats. Yes, organizations get a bunch of different things. Not an asset, a feat. Technically, they're called benefits, but So organizations have assets and benefits. Assets are things that basically swap around, and you can gain them and lose them, and while benefits are basically called that because, I mean, they used to be called feats, but we call them benefits now because they're not really feats. They're benefits provided by your leaders. Organizations, however, start with 2 benefits. The question is, what kind of benefit do we want our organization to have? Hmm. Arsenal, of course. But what else? Arsenal and emergency response. Arsenal, by the way, will give our organization a +5 to force checks for acquiring weaponry and has access to military grade or illegal equipment, which is why we immediately chose Arsenal, because this is a game that is supposed to have access to that kind of thing. And emergency response is not medical in any way. Emergency response is the organization gets a +5 bonus to response for the purpose of determining response time, which is used in requesting assistance checks. Okay. Of course, properties, assets, equipment don't have elite, important, or influential. Do they have any properties, assets, or equipment? Hmm. Here we are. Perhaps. Well, we know they have property. That's like undoubtable. Here we are. No, that's a mistake. Please have a variant. Okay. That's annoying. I was hoping I had the grid that I use for something. Which is houses. 5, 10, 15. Here we are. So basically, if you don't know what I'm doing, I am making a lot, which I should have already had. I don't mean a lot, I mean like a lot. So basically, property is measured in lots. This is not working out. There. This is going to be annoying to do. That counts as 4. 20 lots. Give or take. Let's double check that we did that right by making sure that that is what a lot is. We will note it down real fast. Because we have rules for property and lots. Assuming this ever loads, we will have our information. It should be near the bottom of the page. Unless I saved it in a different rulebook. Nope, here it is. Yes, 50 by 100 is one lot, and 50 by 50 is a half lot. So yes, they have 20 lots in their property. Give or take, of course, but we'll round to 20. Rather than seeing whether that half a thing counts as half a lot, because a lot is measured. Lots cannot be divided. Like, just because something's not entirely in a thing does not mean it is. So I don't think it's 50. Like, so that would definitely be an additional lot. But like this section might not be, but we're not going to worry too much about that. So we have our listed lots. There are also other things to go over. However, it is about time for coffee. I will be right back. It will take a minute, of course. Have to get the conscripts to make the coffee right, of course. So I'll be back in very shortly. I suppose we should have gone like that to point out the lots, but you know, basically I was just measuring this against that. It's not like it was really anything important. Anyway, I'll be right back. we return for like a minute, but you know. So yes, basically, well, organizations and the like, that's basically what we've been working on today after all the rambling. Setting up the gang to be able to do all of the things it needs to be able to do for our campaign. We will, of course, be covering a lot of things in Galactic Requiem. That is, of course, why we go about this. It is, of course, why we chose Juliana Aldis. We'd have to scroll all the way up. Let's... Okay, this is literally the bottom of the sheet. That's fine. That's why we chose Juliana Aldis to follow around on adventures. Because she is a average NPC. I say average NPC, I mean, as a class, there's a reason we chose that class, because it gives a wide variety of options in how you go about things. It's meant for NPCs, of course. We have on occasion let players use the class, but it's mainly meant for NPCs because it's designed to be allowed. Well, it's designed to allow the GM to make any NPC required. It's modular, if you will. The way it's set up is it's modular. You choose beforehand certain things, and it allows you to swap things, not actively, but basically when you're designing the character, it allows you to swap things around, take certain things, not take other things, to allow you to make a character that can basically fill any role, be it barber to military officer, without having to go through all the trouble of basically going, is this person needs this many tiers of strong hero, then this many tiers of field commander, or this many tiers of this class over to this class, which is annoying when generating NPCs, especially when the way I run Galactic Requiem is not only will I give every character a story and so forth, if you know the characters ask, but any character in the game, the way I run has a stat block and needs a stat block. And the average NPC allows me to use a generic template to represent anything because it's modular, instead of having to mess around with all these different classes in order to get something every time. I can literally just look at a chart and be like, okay, average NPC this level, he'll take the bonus to combat because he's a combat NPC, and these feats because they're not limited to the amount of feats. So this now is combat. Well, he's limited to the amount of feats, but you know, not limited to the. Basically it allows you to make an NPC that is balanced, but makes an NPC that's balanced, but you don't need to spend all this time going over all these charts and so forth to figure out which one of the classes and then advanced classes they spec into and which level and whether they have the right things for it and so forth. Basically allowing you to have options and so forth when making an NPC. But it also allows us to basically show off all the different things for what's available in Galactic Requiem. Of course, I'll be the coffee's ready. My apologies. I'll cover this in just a second. Okay. So, as I was saying, basically, it allows us to show off a lot of options without being limited by class. Because the average NPC's special feat is to mimic the abilities and first off, the average NPC gets a lot of feats. It gets a feat every level. And it allows you to mimic special abilities from classes if you meet certain prerequisites. Literally just designed to make NPCs that can fit in any role easily. But there are certain things that it has that does limit us, admittedly. For instance, we are, with Juliana Aldis, a tier... A tier... What is it? Tier 2 caster. In order to be a tier 4 caster, you need the caster class all the way. You can't have any other class be a tier 4 caster. If you have any other class in caster class, you're a tier 3 caster. And if you don't have the caster class, you're at most a tier 2 caster. There is a tier 1 and 0, but I mean, yeah, there are lots of tier 1s and 0s out there. But basically, you can't be higher than a tier 2 without the caster class. There are exceptions. The Empire, of course, being the most advanced nation in the galaxy, has exceptions to these rules. I think I've been over this once before. I was actually considering, personally, getting a caster augmented. Not for this Juliana fellow, but personally me. Because, I mean, I've never been big on the whole casting magic thing, you know? But I considered it for a short while. I mean, we are one of the few factions that can actually make tier 4 casters without having the class. Also, making tier 4 casters in the first place. There we are. So, basically, even without the whole... it is... How do I put this? Casting is... Well, there are different tiers of casting. There's an entire thing we could get into involving magic and so forth. I mean, not all casting is magic. There's also psionics and... Anyway. Basically, nobody can make casters above a certain tier. It's written down in our caster book somewhere. Where is our caster book? Here we are. It's listed somewhere. I believe it's... this is from memory, by the way. have to note that because I cannot recall. And I don't like giving wrong information. So, as I recall from memory, every nation in the galaxy cannot make higher than a tier 2 caster. Like, even if somebody is a caster, they can't make somebody higher than tier 2. Of course, there are casters who are higher tier. There are casters who are higher tier. But generating casters artificially is not easy. It can be done, and I believe they can make up to tier 2 in the wider galaxy, but they can't turn somebody into a tier 3 or 4 caster. Well, the Empire is, well, we can make casters and combine it with normal classes. So you don't need to have the caster class to be able to cast as a tier 4. We are sort of the best in the galaxy, of course. Let's see. So we just finished noting down how many property blocks they have. Oh, that would be at the bottom of this file here. Okay. We're going to make this scale 6. I will have to swap over to here to do that, but it will not stop bugging me that this is out of size. Here we are. One more moment as we make this scale. Perfect. Huh? What the? Oh. Oh, okay. There's just a bit of a delay. My apologies. I changed the scale of it. Then I swapped back over to here. And I looked over and nothing at all changed. And it was like, what's going on? No, it was just taking a moment. Oh. And because we were messing with it earlier, it's slightly off, but there. So, as you can see, everything fits. Specifically, you see the line. It's not on 2 lines. Isn't that amazing? Let's see. So we have a pop of 100 because they have a gangster unit of 120 lots, a variety of assets. That's not even where the mouse is on the other screen. Nope, I must have off-clicked. There. Now it won't be in the way. Okay, good. So, here we have all of our base things, emergency response and arsenal. Assets and equipment are relevant-ish. What can we classify as technically being an asset that they have? For that, let's open back up our nations book. Okay, so, nope. And that's not ideal. That's unfortunate once more. So we'll just search in the other section for it because that will make it so much easier. We go over to here, nations and organizations. Go over to organizations and scroll down ever so slightly till we get to the section for assets. Here we are. Attached to facility attachments, attached to facility/property to increase its asset modifier. Basic skill, training program, developed skill network, optimized skill methods, advanced skill automation, streamlined skill logistics. The skill in each of those is in brackets to represent that you input the name of the skill, and that's the thing that the modifier affects. Then there's facility modifiers. Organization equipment, that's what we're looking for. The most generic of equipment. We'll say that they likely have specialized equipment mechanics. No. What we're looking for? Nope, yep, it is that. Specialized equipment mechanics. As I said, they are meant like that. By the way, if you didn't know, so intimidation is obviously intimidate, but manipulate is not like using an object, it's manipulating a target. If you're wondering why we put into manipulate for gangsters, because manipulate is skill used to control opinion through ploys and complex mind games. It is used to make harassment and slander checks. Which, I mean, they're a gang. They're going to intimidate and harass the local businesses to get them to pay. Which is why they have manipulate. As opposed to something else like impress. Which is similar, but, you know, it's doing so through standard social means. It's usual standard interaction and the like, but that's more of a personal thing. And by that I mean like that's a person to person thing. And while yes, a organization can specialize in it, it's not like a gang is going to specialize in. I mean, they might. It's not impossible, but it's not like a gang is going to specialize in sort of dealing with the locals. It's not like they can't. I mean, it's an option. It's fully an option. But we're talking a, you know, sort of sort of like, cyberpunk gang. They're not here to deal kindly with the locals. Sure, they do, but that's, like I said, on a more personal level, the person to person. It's not built into the gang's organization to do so, you know what I mean? The gang has methods of doing the other things. When dealing with people kindly, it's just their members dealing with people, so there's no innate bonus on their rolls for it. Let's see. Specialized equipment mechanics, that's technically not under equipment. That's technically under assets. I know it's called equipment, but there's a reason for that. Technically, this is an asset, while equipment is used to store items that they might have with no mechanical benefit. Even though that one's called equipment, that's just how that works. We're not actually going to go over all this. This usually matters if we're dealing with something a bit smaller. If, as it comes up, we might edit it. The reason I say that is, so there's, what we would be doing is sitting here going, specialized equipment, this specialized equipment, that skill, generic equipment, this skill, generic equipment, that skill. For instance, they have generic equipment, medical, well, type medicine. They have, a bunch of generic equipment and some specialized equipment. And some other things, but it's not too important. It's far less important to the things we do. So that, for the most part, covers our setup for our gang. It gives them some abilities that we'll build upon, and I think we'll call it there. Because next time is Solo Sunday. I'm going to go over all of my notes and see where we left off. And then we'll pick up with playing the game on Sunday. And hopefully, now that our little issue has been solved with FTL, it won't happen again. And we'll be back on schedule. So, yeah, I think we'll call it there. Thank you all for stopping by. And, we'll try and get back on track with everything. We're going to restart work on our lore series. I said restart work. Like I said, we've been trying to fix things. We're going to get back into finishing up the lore series of videos. We're going to continue to world build, of course, and run solo Sundays. And miscellaneous Fridays, we'll continue to do whatever. And, we'll get back to it all now that things appear to theoretically be working again. So, thank you all for stopping by. And I hope to see you all next time.